So I'm gonna hit the button.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, we are now live on YouTube for Tech Talks. And today's topic was going to be, what do we call it? Getting the most out of Zoom annotations. Because I don't know how many people make really good use of the annotation tool, but there's all kinds of pretty neat student engagement and student feedback things that we can do using the annotation tool. And our good friend Nick had a whole slew of them to share with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. I'm actually really excited about this because this is one of my favorite ways to make synchronous online meetings a little bit more engaging. So whether that be a lecture you're giving, or maybe it's some activity that you want to give online, but just aren't sure how to make it like it was on ground. That's kind of where I see the utility of this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be actually using a PowerPoint today to kind of keep us in line. Hey, Jared. Hey, Angela. So I'm going to share that now. All right, let's do this. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Zoom annotation tools. And you might notice that on my screen, you should be able to see my Zoom windows. That's obviously not a default, but that was actually on purpose.
Nick, we do not see your Zoom toolbars yet.
Oh, okay. Let's do this. Let's double check them. Because that is a very important aspect of this.
There.
Do you see it now? Awesome.
No.
Huh. Do you see it now?
No, I see your PowerPoint toolbars, but I don't see your Zoom toolbar.
Well, that's unfortunate. We can work past this, so don't worry.
That's cool.
That was just going to be a nice addition. I thought I had those settings correct, but we will cover what I was attempting to do shortly. So when I'm talking about Zoom annotation tools, what I'm referring to is the ability to draw and interact with your screen using tools within Zoom. So the way that we find those is, one, we have to make sure it's enabled. And that's what this URL is at the top, and we'll go to that shortly. But what that does is that allows these two things to pop up, whether you're sharing a screen, which is our first picture up here, you'll see this annotation tool pop up. Or if you're viewing somebody else's screen that has it on, you'll see under view options. So in your case, you should be seeing something similar to you're viewing Nick Taylor's screen. Click on view options and annotate will be under those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push us out to our Zoom settings using that little URL that we had in the PowerPoint. And if I scroll down to in meeting basic, scroll down a little bit further, I should see under annotation, here we are. I should see that it's blue, meaning that's been enabled. And that's going to allow host and participants to use annotation tools. And that's just during any time a shared screen is occurring. The caveat is this is specific to sharing a screen from a desktop or a laptop. If I did this with my phone or my iPad, it would not work the same way. You'd be able to pull up a whiteboard to annotate, but you wouldn't have the ability to do a couple of the other things I'm going to talk about. So when we're doing this, we're assuming that somebody's going to be Zooming from a laptop or a desktop. If you know that you've got that enabled, then the next step is to share your screen. So right now, that's what I'm doing. I am sharing my screen, and I'm going to actually do a new share. I'm just going to create a blank whiteboard. And now that I've done that, we should see this white space for everybody. Is everybody seeing that?
Yep, we see that, but I don't see an annotation button yet. Have you not done that part yet?
So if you go to to that green blurb at the top of your screen, says Nick Taylor is sharing his screen, click view more options. Are you seeing annotation?
No, I just see.
I wonder if it's an issue of the meeting itself.
Oh,
that's worrisome.
I wonder if it's my meeting settings. Do I need to have annotation turned on from my Zoom account since I'm hosting?
Here, maybe try that. Do you see the option now?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so
Okay.
I think
What'd you do?
in your meeting specifically, there is, I think you have it disabled for others to annotate.
Oh,
So I enabled annotation for others. I think that just might be that those settings that we were looking at, one of them, I think, is only the host can annotate or only you can annotate when you're sharing the screen. So that's
okay.
something to consider. So, okay, now
We're good.
everybody should
We're good.
be seeing some sort of annotation, right?
Yes.
So this is a good, sticking point or a good learning point really for me, because I've had situations come up where some of the Zoom settings I thought were good to go, but I was really hosting from someone else's account. Definitely a good learning moment for me too, Nick.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ben.
And we didn't really practice what we preach this time around, but it is a good idea to try out these tools in just a private meeting, either by yourself or invite one of your coworkers to say, hey, could you hop in my meeting for 5 minutes so we can test some things out? But it looks like we're working now.
Okay, yeah, we're cooking with Crisco. So right now, all I've done is I've shared a whiteboard, and that's just one of the tile options when you're sharing your screen. And essentially, it gives you a place to do annotations. We'll talk about how you actually annotate really anything shortly after this. But as people are already starting to see, it's really easy to get engaged with this. The tools are very simply, you can create text boxes, you can draw, you can, if you are the individual running the show or sharing the screen, you can use something called Spotlight. So in this case, I've created a little laser pointer that I'm using to kind of highlight what I'm looking at. They added a new one called a vanishing pen. So I could circle something and then over time it would go away. So I'd be able to quickly move through slide decks or through diagrams that I'm working with
That's cool.
individuals on. There's a lot of stuff you can do. I see that people are playing around with stamps. You have the ability to create little check boxes. You can create X marks, great for really quick polling and surveying in a visual sense. I do like the question mark one. And I've used that in the past where I have people choose a stamp that aligns with how they're feeling about a certain topic. And then with the text box, we have the ability to create these long answers that can be a little bit more free form, so like word clouds and stuff like that. And with those, individuals won't see it until you finish typing, and then it'll show up. The important thing to note is we've got a lot of stuff going on the screen right now, and you can see how it would kind of get out of control really quickly if you weren't either creating spaces for people to annotate on or weren't clearing things as you went. So as the one sharing the screen, so the person in charge, so to speak, I can actually clear all of these drawings. So there we go. I just kind of etch-a-sketch the whiteboard. If you didn't mean to do that, you do have the option to undo or redo. So if I undo that, everything comes back. If I redo, everything goes away. Anytime I share this whiteboard, those annotations will come up. So I could close this down. I could go to a PowerPoint. I could then reshare this whiteboard. Like I said, it's an option in those tiles when you're choosing what screen you want to share. You'd be able to pull back to it, but once you close the meeting, it's gone forever. If you're annotating like a desktop or a shared PowerPoint, something like that, it's like an etch-a-sketch. The moment you close it down, those annotations are gone, generally speaking.
You can save those annotations as a file, right?
Exactly. So the last option in your line should be a save. And that's another one of those settings that you'll need to make sure that you check that you allow all participants to be able to save any annotations. And what it's going to do is it's going to create an image of whatever's on your screen. So for instance, I could take a screenshot through Zoom of this whiteboard and save it for later as an image or a PDF. With this whiteboard, you can create multiple areas for people to annotate. So I could have something on the first page, something on the second page. Each of those would be their own prompt or their own interaction with anybody involved. And then when you save it, it'll be separate pages of a PDF, or it'll be separate images. So it's also something to consider. Now,
A cool feature I just noticed is I've got it open on my cell phone too, and I have the option to save right there. It's just easily clickable.
awesome.
Also, just the touch screen of the phone, of the mobile device, is a whole lot nicer than trying to draw on my mouse. It's a
Yeah, and if you're
handier tool.
presenting from like an iPad, you can use this whiteboard. And remember when I said that there's certain things that the computer will do that like a phone or an iPad won't. The main thing is allow annotation over anything that's being shared. Whereas iPads, phones, you can create these little whiteboards to collaborate on, but you can't, say, share a Google Chrome window from your iPad and be surfing the internet having people annotate what you're doing, if that makes sense. So we've got this version of annotation using the whiteboard. I'm going to clear this out. I'm actually going to do a new share, and I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint, because what I want to do is, one, make sure that everybody's able to annotate, but two, show some examples of a way that you can frame annotation in, say, a lecture or some sort of a meeting that you're doing. So we've already gone over how we can. I see Caleb is able to annotate, so thank you for that quick check. I'm going to open it up. I'll clear that out. If I go to my next slide, one thing you want to note is when you've got annotation open, you can either draw, text, select things, or you can get back to your mouse if you're sharing your desktop. So say I'm drawing and I'm trying to move to the next slide. I wouldn't be able to, because every time I click, I'm creating ink. I would need to make sure that I switch over to the mouse, if that makes sense.
And when you're in annotation mode, all of my normal Zoom buttons also disappear until I press, unless I press the mouse button in the annotation toolbar, and now I can mute myself and unmute in those things too.
Yeah, so it basically takes over the mouse. It gives it a different purpose.
Gotcha.
So I just want to make sure if you are using like a PowerPoint or something like that, you won't be able to navigate until you get back to the mouse like I was doing just there. So what I want to do is I want us to kind of practice this, and I kind of want to show off the different ways that you can use it. And if we come to this slide, at the top of my screen, all I've done is written in PowerPoint a prompt. Who do you consider to be the most important band of the 90s? And then what I would do if I had some sort of word cloud like this, I'd ask everybody, open up your annotation tool, and let's go to the text option. And I want you to write out, who do you consider to be the most important band? And then I can start to see in real time, people put up their responses. Something I can also do as the person that's sharing is I can move people's responses around. So Caleb said Radiohead. We see his name at the bottom when, or I should say I see his name at the bottom when I select it. I can put mine in. I'm a fan of awful goth metal. So
typo negative, yes.
it's an unfortunate thing about me.
My daughter would agree.
Okay. But anyway, so we can quickly get these word clouds going. It doesn't take a lot. And then when I'm done, I can save it and use it for later or share it with my students. Or I could take it and I could maybe, okay, here's our top three. We've got Radiohead, typo negative, we've got REM. Now what I want you to do is I want you to go to your stamps, find your check mark, and of those three, which do you think of those three is the best? And then you would have your students or individuals. Yeah, okay, that's fair. Go in and give their little votes. So that's another way that you can kind of use the annotation tool to quickly pull. And it's all very visual. So your students get to see it, you get to see it, and it's really dynamic. And something that you might find is that if you're on a Mac, your mouse will disappear. So that's what I've been struggling with when you're annotating. Okay. Oh, and Sonic Youth. Awesome. Now, something I want to note is if I click to advance to the next slide, those annotations stay because they're not interacting with the slide itself, but my actual screen. So the workflow would be I clear all of my drawings after saving if I need them. Then I would navigate to the next slide. And here we just have a quick check of, say you've got something coming up that you want to get the students' thoughts on or just their feeling about. You can do these quick temperature checks. And in this case, yeah, use a stamp. Tell me where you're at for this upcoming test. You can either stamp on the faces or stamp below them. That's another way that you can, once again, quickly see where your students are. And it's a way of them doing it in a way that isn't super involved. They don't have to have another application that they're opening. And you can, of course, save all this at the end. And when you do save it, it will be anonymous. So that's also something to consider.
I really like this temperature check graphic here. Just super clean, great student engagement and check-in tool.
And this was all just made using icons and PowerPoint. So you can, I think that's kind of the beauty of it, is sky's the limit of what you put behind your annotation. That's kind of the theme I hope we all take away from this. So then let's say I've got a polarizing topic, you know, cookie dough and ice cream. Some people might feel very strongly. I can get responses in a way that's a little bit easier than, say, using the chat. I see a lot of these kind of prompts being used, and then people saying, oh, well, put in the chat, yes or no. Do you stand for it? Do you not?
Get out of here, Bonnie.
I love it. One of the caveats, obviously, being that you can stamp as many times as you want. So it's not exactly a true way of voting, but it's a way that you can see where everybody in the room stands.
Although if you didn't want to make it anonymous, you could just have them put their names in each column. If you wanted to use that to kind of make groups or spur discussion, then you would only have one per person.
And you could use like the text, for instance, and just write your name. That's great. I love that.
Or Bonnie would make up fake names.
So there's that important. I think Bonnie would find a way around it, seeing as she feels very strongly against it. There you go. So then I think what we've got next is similar pros and cons. Instead of using stamps, this would be using like texts. Pros, you know, home defense. You can essentially do a word cloud, but in a way that's a little bit more structured. And once again, just a quick way of polling, getting responses in a dynamic way. What I like about annotation and specifically things like this is I could then go, okay, well, cons, expensive water bill. In this case, everything's pretty self-explanatory, but you could have things where individuals might need to explain their thinking a little bit more, and that's where you could call on somebody or have them write out a little bit further, just to kind of extrapolate on what they're saying. Let's find my mouse again. There we go. Yeah, I love it. Now let's see. Sorry, Angela, deleting your stuff. This is a little bit more complex, and this kind of quadrant is something I used previously in a very skill-oriented session that I was doing, where you can, once again, get a feel for how everybody is, but I'm using quadrants, so I'm adding another element to this. So in this case, we could say, you know, I'm demonstrating the skill of how to annotate. Where do you feel about that if you were trying to do that on your own? So the idea would be that you'd get a couple of different, or a number of different people in different spots, and then you can kind of gauge where the next part of the session should go. And there's a lot of people that need more time to feel confident performing whatever the skill is. I could have opened the floor for questions and have them kind of have that opportunity to ask further and get that clarification that they need. And then I think we go into a little bit of our diagrams. So we kind of saw a quick temperature check earlier, but you can do heat map style questions to your audience. In this case, this is one I've used in the past, which of the following is skeletal muscle? And then I would poll the individuals, use your stamps to determine. I'm not actually going to ask you that because it's very subject oriented. Caleb, that's actually cardiac muscle, but really good shot. You had a 1 in 3 chance. It is in fact A, that would be our skeletal muscle, B is smooth muscle, and C is cardiac muscle. But another way of polling individuals using annotation, getting them to think about what you're showing and make a commitment to a certain answer.
Well, I think there's some nuance there too, because Caleb and I are using, maybe everybody are using question marks to mark our answer, maybe showcasing how much confidence we have with our answers.
Very unconfident.
Yeah, see, that's a great idea. I haven't even thought about that. Yeah, you could use stamps. Like if you're 100% on this, use a check mark. If you're like, I don't know at all, X mark. And if you're kind of somewhere neutral in between, question mark. I love that. That's awesome.
Well, and you could use this technique for all kinds of different subjects. You could diagram sentences this way. You could look at a circuit board or a truck engine or anatomy or a solar system. So many different things you could do using this technique.
Yeah, I love the idea of looking at like sentence structure. That's awesome. Yeah, sort of kind of collaborative editing. That's so cool. I love that. Pretty diverse, hopefully. Here's another example. I just chose the ADDIE model, which is a instructional design model, but I could ask everybody, what stage in this model do you generally consult with faculty about, about their course design, or when do you need to interview a faculty member to understand exactly what they're trying to accomplish in their course. So you could have individuals, try to one, show that they know how the diagram works, but also that they know the model underneath it and can interact with it. So I think that's another way that you can use this, and that's just we're using the visual, pasting it into a PowerPoint, and then creating something out of that. And then the last thing I wanted to note was it doesn't just have to be, say, a PowerPoint or something like that. One of the other things that you can do with this as a presenter or somebody that's maybe demoing something is literally anything on your device. So that's what I like about it, is that if it's on your desktop, it can be annotated by individuals in the meeting with you. So for instance, I could go and share, say, Canvas, and this is a use I've used it for before, but I imagine there's probably applications that you're using in your classroom, or there's things that might need a little bit more of an in-depth navigation with students or with your audience. I could say, say I'm doing a Canvas orientation and I ask, okay, where do you think we would find a list of all of the learning modules in this Canvas course? Use your stamps to show me where you think that would be. And then my audience hopefully would be able to kind of indicate where exactly they think that would be happening on the screen. So in this case, I would go, okay, we see we've got a couple of different responses. So that could mean that there's some confusion, means I might need to come back to something. But we would click into the modules, and that's where we'd see all the learning material. So you can show demos of applications. You can show demos of, say, I've seen people use a number of different STEM-related lab applications this way, where they've got it open in a browser and they're working with the students to create little experiments in the simulations. That's just another way to think about how this might work. And now that I've kind of gone through all of that, I'm going to stop sharing and kind of open up the door for questions, awesome comments, because I know we got a great group here today. Just open the floor to that kind of collaboration around this.
And for those of you in Zoom, I just put a link in the chat that goes to the PowerPoint template that Nick was using. If you ever want to just steal a slide off of that and pop it into your own, like that temperature check slide. You can do that. And then that link should also be available in the YouTube stream in the video description.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Caleb.
I have a question that's, been sticking with me ever since the 90s most important rock band. I don't think Jared put an answer there. And I'm wondering, do you need more time to think about it? Do you have a deep thoughts there?
I was trying to remember which decade the 90s was. Like, wait, was that recently? No. I think Radiohead was a great selection. Yeah.
Now, see, Nick, if you had said the greatest band of the 2010s, I wouldn't be able to answer that because I'm old now.
Arcade Fire. There's only one answer.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. So I have an idea about using this annotation in the browser that just kind of occurred to me when you were talking about that. I had I think it was a criminal justice instructor a couple of years ago who did this super cool thing in her live classes where she would show video clips of things like CSI or Law and Order. And it was a game that she called OK Stop, where they would watch a video. And then as soon as a student saw something that was not realistic, they would say, OK, stop. And then she'd pause the video. And then they'd say, well, this thing that they're showing in the show is not like a real investigation in this way and in this way. I could imagine doing that with the annotation tool in Zoom, where you're playing the video in your browser, and then you pause the video and you tell them, tell me what's wrong in this video. What are they doing that is not realistic? Or what are they doing that is realistic?
I love the flexibility that gives. I mean, you can literally do anything with that. That's awesome.
Something that really occurred to me was how useful this will be for committee meetings too, which for me right now are largely Zoom based, and the kinds of things that I used to be able to do in person with whiteboards and sticky notes and those kinds of things. Just love the idea of getting that sort of voting on, strategic priorities, for example, from the group with the tools. I need to do that next time.
Well, yeah, rather than waiting for everybody to fill out the form and the survey when we're all right here in the same space. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then have everybody save the copy of it and then go do something based on that annotation that everybody came up with.
One thing I often get questioned for, and I never have a great answer, is when an instructor wants to annotate on Zoom, what's the best tool for them to actually get a good, clean, annotation, especially in art class or where like the pen and the actual touch is important. I kind of have one recommendation, which is one of those touch screen monitors. And I know we have a couple in the innovation studios, but for someone's personal setup, do you have any recommendations, Nick?
Yeah, actually, I was lucky enough to do a lot of this using an iPad before, and that's been a really, I think, depending on whether you're Mac or PC, I think if you've got, I think I'm trying to think, is it the Surface Pro? That's the kind of device you use. I think those two have been really, really stellar when it comes to this kind of interaction. You can present PowerPoints from both of them now and use their stylus during that. You can use your stylus with annotation. And I think with the Surface, it should act like a desktop, so you wouldn't get that, oh, you can only use a whiteboard. With an iPad, you can connect to a desktop if you're using Mac, and then that kind of gets around it, so you get a little bit more flexibility. But yeah, those the pens on both of those seem to be pretty stellar, but obviously there's a cost associated with that. I think I've seen also people use Wacom's stylus system. It's just a USB plug-in. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That seems to work pretty well too.
Yeah, the only limitation with those is unless you spring for the really expensive one, it's more like a trackpad surface. So it doesn't have a screen on it where you can see what you're drawing. So it takes some practice. And I've seen some instructors, once they practice with it, they get really, really good with using those. But you can get a decent Wacom tablet for like $100, I think, 200 maybe. So not as big of an investment as buying a Surface Pro just for this.
This is really great and so helpful. And I'm just remembering when I tried this out a little bit at the e-learning academy this summer. I just want to kind of go back and amplify something that you showed us, Nick, which is the part about while you're annotating, your mouse stops working, and so you really have to be conscious of that. Because you can get 3 steps ahead and realize, oh, I'm not doing any of the things I think I'm doing yet. And then at least if you're me, you get panicky. So if you just go into it remembering, switch back and forth between mouse and annotation tool.
Yeah. And that's just where, practicing on your own is a big help. Because you can open up your own Zoom room anytime you want. You don't need to have anybody in it. You don't need to share it with anybody, and just do whatever you want in there with no pressure. Or like I said, invite one of your coworkers, ask them if they'll join you for 5 or 10 minutes. You can try some things out, and that helps me a lot.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Caleb. And yeah, I found that I've discovered that myself, that I can be in a Zoom room by myself, which is really great. It's like meditative. But what's cool is you can record it. And so then you can see those kind of things that maybe what would a user see? It gives you that space to see what looked different from my end versus what they would have actually seen.
Yeah.
So not just using the Zoom room, but recording yourself in a Zoom room is even handier.
Very true. Then you have to watch and listen to yourself again, which is always hard for me.
Right.
I would actually like to build off something you said, Jared. I mentioned briefly the Spotlight tool, which is something that if you're sharing your screen, you have access to. That vanishing pen, I think they created that specifically for presenting, but also recording. So you can quickly draw on your screen and then navigate to the next thing without having to clear anything out. So that can be nice for that kind of either a demonstration or you're just working through content and want to highlight an idea. I love stuff like that.
And where was that? Was that in the? I know I've used that. Was that in that same set of tools?
Yes. So that's one of the benefits of in the future, you'd be able to actually see my annotation tools as I flip through them. But when you're the person sharing your screen, you have an additional area called Spotlight that has a couple of options in there. I think on your end, on the individual that's participating in the annotation or is annotating somebody's screen, you have the ability to kind of put a marker with your name next to areas. So Kayla would be able to tag a part of my screen and say, hey, Nick, I need you to stop. Can you see what I tagged? I'm confused on that. Whereas on the presenter side, you would be able to call attention to certain places like the vanishing pen, laser pointer. They've got a little digital laser pointer now, that kind of stuff.
Cool. Well, we're just about out of time. Any parting thoughts before we put this Tech Talks in the bag?
Just thanks for being here and enjoying annotation tools with us.
Thanks, Nick. It was a great presentation, great tool. So many applications.
It really is. We need to promote this. This is great. Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining and for watching on YouTube, and we'll see you all next week. What's next week's? Next week is Panopto engagement, right?
I believe so. Yeah, quizzes and maybe analytics. Yeah, we'll get into all that and more.
Cool. Sounds good.
And
All
90s rock bands.
That's gonna show up a couple times.
Yeah, well, just don't play anything that'll get us flagged for copyright infringement.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Bye, guys.
See you all later.
Bye. Thanks, Nick.
Here, everyone.